Campaign news. As I mentioned at the top of the show, we learned today that Democrats have tapped Assemblyman David Weprin to be their candidate in the special election to fill Anthony Weiner's old seat. The Weprin family name is quite well known in Queens, where the majority of this House district lies. His father was a longtime assemblyman, and he served as the Speaker from 1991 until his death in 1994. David Weprin's brother Mark actually held his assembly seat before he became a city councilman. This is very confusing, I know, but they literally switched positions, the two of them. It's possible that David Weprin will face off against Republican Bob Turner, who ran back in 2010 and lost by about 24,000 votes to Anthony Weiner. At this point, however, the Republicans have not officially chosen a candidate. They appear divided between a former aide to New York City Mayor Giuliani and this gentleman, Bob Turner. Joining us now to talk more about this race, maybe give us some insight into sort of Queens politics in general, because it's a little confusing, is Senator Mike Gianaris. He is, of course, from Queens. Senator, thanks for your time.
Thank you, Liz.
So this is not a terribly a surprise, but I guess my question is, why would a guy like David Weprin, who just won an assembly seat and has been in politics a long time, want a seat that everybody thinks might disappear in 2012?
Well, there's always a lot of uncertainty about these things, and I mean, it was not too long ago that people like us were asking why Kathy Hochul would want a congressional seat in Western New York that everyone thought would be gone. So things change very quickly in politics, and the opportunity for someone like David, who has a distinguished record in public service, to step into such an important position, I think he probably looked at it and thought he could contribute for the remainder of the term and then take it from there. But you know, in politics, a day is an eternity, much less a year and a half. So who knows what the opportunity will be by the time the term ends.
You know, the Queens Democrats are best known for being disciplined, where a lot of other party organizations are not. So once Joe Crowley, who is also a congressman and the chairman of the Queens Democratic Party, makes a decision along with Vito Lopez, who is the Brooklyn chairman, lesser so, the district is a little bit in Brooklyn. Do you believe that that's it, right? It's a done deal? Nobody's going to challenge this decision?
Well, I think as a matter of law, that because it's a special election, the parties get to designate their candidates. And one of the reasons the Queens Democratic Party has been so successful and is so strong is because it's very inclusive. So I think when Chairman Crowley makes a decision like this, he does it in consultation with the party activists throughout the district. And in this case, I think that is shown by his choice, because the Weprins, as you pointed out, have a very long and distinguished history in Queens politics, and I don't think that you're going to find anyone who can quibble with the choice that was made.
You know, another thing about this choice, which is pretty striking, is that David Weprin is no Anthony Weiner, and I don't mean that in a bad way. I mean, after a scandal like what we saw with Anthony Weiner, who is very outspoken, very flashy in terms of verbosity, his own guy, if you will, and he wanted to run for mayor, David Weprin prides himself on being kind of nebbishy, actually. I mean, do you think that played into this decision at all?
I don't think so. I mean, look, David, I served with him in the Assembly for my last year in that body before I moved to the Senate, and I know his brother Mark extremely well, as you know. But I think what happened is David stepped forward, was willing to take on the challenge, and has a career that no one can argue with. We can be comfortable as Democrats that he's a terrific candidate that will win the special election and will serve with distinction.
Yeah, and he's a conservative guy who also happens to be an observant Jew, and that is important in this district, isn't it?
Well, the demographics do have a large Jewish population, and I don't know how much that played into the final decision. More importantly, I think you have an individual who has a long and distinguished record, who I think we in Queens can all feel comfortable with, will make us proud as a choice, and we'll go from there and see what happens next year.
Right, and you know, it really all has to do with redistricting. I mean, do you believe that there needed to be some, and I know that you weren't in on this decision, but there needed to be a conversation with David Weprin that, David Weprin, if you win this special election, you will not run in 2012? I mean, he might actually have to take on a colleague if that district goes away. He might end up primarying somebody like Gary Ackerman, a veteran member of Congress.
Well, I don't know the specific answer to your question, but there's a lot of uncertainty yet to go about redistricting. I'm sure we're going to talk about that as well. But there's a huge question mark hanging over the whole process. So while political prognosticators may want to sit with their own maps and decide that this district will vanish, we don't know who's even going to be making the decision. So if we end up with an independent body or a court drawing these lines, which it increasingly looks like is what's going to happen, then all bets are off, and we don't know what's going to happen with this district or any of the others.
Yeah, let's talk about redistricting, because you've been a champion of independent redistricting reform for some time. You had a bill when you were in the Assembly for an independent commission. Yesterday we saw the governor say, actually really for the first time in a while, that he will in fact veto a plan that's come up by the legislature, right, that's planned by the legislature. The legislature got started yesterday with its plans, is full steam ahead. I mean, do you think that the legislature should stop? It should not go forward at all?
Yes. I mean, I believe we should proceed with an independent process. I've been very clear about that. A vast majority of both houses of the legislature had promised to do just that.
Wait, but Mike, hold on.
Yeah.
Here's the problem. You didn't pass the independent bill, right? You didn't do the reform because the Senate Republicans didn't want to. The Assembly didn't do it either. So now you're running out of time. I mean, if you just stop Lat 4, nothing happens.
Well, that's, I'm sure, what the Senate Republicans would like you to believe, and I think Senator Nozzolio essentially made that point. They would love nothing more than to turn the corner on the reform efforts, put it behind them, and claim that they have no choice. But the fact is, that is anything but true. And the governor yesterday, to his credit, stepped forward and said what he has said all along. I mean, we were obviously during the session preoccupied with some significant other issues, but going back to his own campaign, where he had it in his campaign platform in writing that he would veto lines that were drawn by the legislature, all he did yesterday was reiterate his long and consistently held belief. And if we've learned nothing about Andrew Cuomo the last 6 months, it's that here's a man who stands by what he says and doesn't play politics the old-fashioned Albany way.
Right.
What we're seeing from the Senate Republicans is an attempt to do things the old way. We passed a bill that's a red herring that can't actually affect anything for another 12 years. So let's just do it the old way in the meantime. But
hold on. Let me ask you this. The good government types want you guys to come back for a special session to force your hand on reform. Do you think that's a good idea?
Absolutely. And let's be clear, they're not forcing the hand of the Senate Democrats. We've been pretty united in our desire to see an independent commission. But to force the hand of the Senate Republicans, you bet. And we could be willing to go back and take care of business that way at a moment's notice. So if the governor sees fit to bring us back and call a special session, I think we'd stand ready to attend and we'd be excited about it.
Well, I mean, you're going to have to come back anyway, because at some point you're going to have to pass the health care exchange bill that the Assembly passed and the Senate didn't take up for whatever reason, because the Republicans didn't want to. You know, another milestone that's going to be happening here on July 15th is the latest Board of Elections filings. You also happen to be wearing the hat of the chief fundraiser for the Senate Democrats. I saw an appeal that you sent out earlier today asking people, based on the good work that you feel the Democrats did during the session, to give money to the conference. How are you going to come out on July 15th? Are you going to be out of debt?
Well, we won't be out of debt. The debt was significant, as you know, and has been reported several times. We came out of a very tough election year where we laid it all out in the field in a bunch of different campaigns, and so it's typical to end the election year in some amount of debt. The hole is pretty large, and we're going to spend a fair amount of time getting out of it. But the fundraising, to answer your question, is going a lot better than we anticipated. We're being very successful. I'm not going to break the news with you tonight in terms of what the news is going to be, but I'm sure you'd like that, Liz.
I would.
But we'll save it for you for next week. But I think you and others will be impressed that things have gone much better than anyone had anticipated.
You know, before I let you go, I just want to ask you. There's a report today in the Daily News about the Independent Democratic Conference chairman, or creator, if you will, Senator Jeff Kline, who used to be the chief fundraiser for the Senate Democrats. You replaced him, and he's going to reportedly have $600,000 on hand when he reports. Are you threatened by that at all? I mean, it's clear that he wants to use this cash maybe to grow his four-member conference into something bigger.
Well, look, everyone makes their own decisions in politics, and Senator Kline and his colleagues have decided to remove themselves from the Democratic conference, so that's their business. We have several members within our own conference who have multiples of that number in their own personal campaign accounts. So, good for him if he's had a successful filing. I suppose that bodes well for him. We're focused on doing what we need to do as Democrats to take back the majority next year and get the Senate moving in the direction it needs to go. Okay, well, Senator Mike Gianaris, I want to thank you very much for joining us this evening. It's good to see you, as always. Thank you, Liz. Thank you, Mike. I appreciate it.